Hey guys, Dakota here. I'm back with another interview, and today I have Vern Martel. Vern, how are you doing?
I am doing great, Dakota, and I would just appreciate you giving me a shout and having me on your podcast. It's pretty
Oh,
phenomenal for a young guy to reach out to us older guys.
well, Vern, I love talking to you, and I think you're just such a fountain of knowledge. I know you've done some podcasts and stuff in the past, and it covers a little bit of everything. I think you have such an amazing story, and I think you're just a very relentless person. When people hear you talk, when people hear you just you can tell you're such a relentless person, and I think that's just something that needs to be talked about, and it's great to talk to you. But so I've watched a few of your podcasts before, and I don't want to kind of talk over too much of things that people can find elsewhere online, but I would like you to give kind of a little breakdown on your accolades in arm wrestling, just yourself, and yeah, pretty much we can start there.
For sure. So, I mean, obviously, I had a time and period in the sport where, I went to an all-time high. I had, it was like a roller coaster ride of doing a ton of things that I never thought possible. And for a lot of the younger generation, I guess it's probably not a name that they're used to. They may have heard stories of, what I've been called the one arm bandit. Obviously, back many, many years ago, I used to compete both arms and did very, very well at it. Actually, my left arm was always my stronger arm. And, but then I got hit by a drunk driver, knocked off a motorbike, and it took years, good 2.5 years just to get out of even a wheelchair and then be able to stand at the table. And now, instead of working with two arms at the table to brace myself, just working with the one armed, which, then I got the code name as the one armed bandit. But from there, it was to try and adjust to the table to develop some, work on angles and different strengths and techniques, leveraging that I needed to offset guys that I'd be going against that were able-bodied with two arms. So that was quite a bit of my journey, was for countless years, just getting out there and getting back into the sport that I loved and trying to do as the best I could with just one arm and navigate my way to compete against some of the best out there.
Wow. That's just such an awesome story, and I think that really does highlight the relentlessness. I mean, obviously that adaptation of going, like you said, left arm was stronger, pulling with two arms, and then having something so devastating happening, having to literally pick yourself back up from square one, refine everything, redevelop something. It's nothing short of amazing. And I do want to highlight, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a 13-time world champion and
Yes,
a 36-time Canadian champion, correct?
yeah, right. And
So,
that was developed through, I mean, in Canada, we were very cut with our wrist wrestling, arm wrestling, John Miastic running arm wrestling, Keith Koenig running wrist wrestling. Being out on the west side here of Canada, wrist wrestling was where I took off, right? Like, I didn't know about arm wrestling until I started venturing eastward, then started getting into some of John Miastic's events and finally winning Canadian titles in that sport, right? So mine come from both the wrist wrestling side and arm wrestling, which now you don't really hear too much about wrist wrestling, but it definitely had its place in time in the world of arm wrestling history and brought a lot of us to filter into this sport from kind of two different sports amalgamating.
yeah, that's awesome. So, for someone who's maybe newer to the sport or someone who's never heard of wrist wrestling, how would you explain the differences in the sports?
The biggest thing back in the day, I mean, there was no pin pads, right? The pin pads was actually the forearm of your competitor, where you would, link up your opposite arm to the competitor and hold hands, and then you compete with the other one. The idea was pushing your shoulder forward of your opposite arm, obviously so that you got to the higher part of your arm so you could pin that guy.
Hmm.
But it was still a lot of jockeying. You had a lot of forces moving from both sides. Then they changed it over to the pin pads, which, again, it changed. It got a similarity of arm wrestling, but it was still different in the way of, your grip up. You could do a full grip up and the referees were holding you and it was bang, go. It wasn't so much of a speed thing as control,
Hmm.
right? And seeing so many different phases of the table change, and from little wires that we had to touch with lights to the pads, little small pads, donut holes, little U pockets. Yeah, in the last 50 years, I've seen a ton of stuff happen on the table, and rules change. And even one rule they changed for me, because they once said you couldn't, it would be a foul, or you couldn't compete if you couldn't hang on to that peg, right?
Hmm.
And obviously, with me moving up, and I'd done a few things in the sport, that when they actually had to address that situation, they realized that I could not physically actually grab the peg. So they actually writ it in their rules, that obviously if a person could not grab the peg, then that would be allowed. But I can remember one tournament that I was denied, that I couldn't even go in, because a competitor wouldn't complain that I wasn't hanging on to the peg, and he thought it was a disadvantage. And I'm like, if you want to let go of that peg and pull me with just arm, I'll be more than happy.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Wow. So yeah, I do want to get into talking about progression of the sport, because I think you are someone who has just as much as anyone really seen it all. But first, I wanted to talk about, we covered this earlier, but just your adaptation on having to learn how to arm wrestle with one arm. Um, d- like, it's got to hit different muscle groups, and it's got to be quite a change to incorporate your legs and everything the way that you do. I, for anyone that hasn't seen you arm wrestle, I highly recommend just looking you up and watching you arm wrestle, because it's amazing. And there's so much footage out there. The ones I always love to watch of you are the 2004 national championships, when you and Perry Broom were back and forth, and that was just, oh, I love watching that so much. It's so fun. But there's so much footage out there of you to watch, and yeah, it's phenomenal. But let's talk about your pulling style and how it changed. How did that come about, and was it something that you had to take a lot of time with, or did you get kind of people to give insight?
yeah. I mean, it did take a long time. I mean, after my accident, I really didn't think that I would ever get back to the table, but it was encouragement within. We had a strong base of arm wrestlers here that we called ourselves, Prince George Iron Arms, which has stuck over the years, right?
Yeah.
But a good core of guys from the 70s, early 80s, where, we trained a lot together, and we just stuck with it. And even though I went through my accident and I was watching them still compete in that, I would get together with one guy, Ian Leslie, that, I met him back in the 70s in the early start, who encouraged me to keep continuing arm wrestling. And he worked with me, and we worked with belts, and we worked with pulleys, we worked with different things to try and isolate me to the table. Um, and then I finally had to start training and doing a lot of regimented core exercises, because rather than actually pulling with my arm, I just tried to form a move that I would stay locked with my arm and chest, and then literally twist with my body. So it
Hmm.
was a lot of my hit was coming from there. But with that, of course, a lot of my speed, people considered that I had some good speed, but a lot of my matches, I learned that I had to develop a lot of good hand strength, wrist strength, and I would actually control a person's hand. So I would actually control them by, stopping them and then beating them. So a lot of my movement was to be able to hold a person, stop their move, and then be able to use my move effectively, like break out on them. And that left no doubt in their mind that I beat them. It wasn't on speed. It
Hmm.
wasn't on me cheating in any way, right? It was just they got into my move, they hit me with everything they had, and I'd literally look them in the eye and then pull them over, you know. And and it worked very, very well for me. Everybody thought it was like a farmer's grip, a very low hand grip top roll, right?
Hmm.
But it was nothing intimidating. If I grabbed somebody's hand, I sat on the low on the back of their wrist. They got all this leverage up top, and they're like, I could see it, the confidence in their eyes that this is one easy match to blow through, right? But I was almost two steps ahead of them where I already knew where they're going with their wrist. I had control of their fingers, where their fingers are going to go. And then it was just an ease back into my back pressure and then extend the top roll. So that was a lot that I worked on and would try different exercises. But I mean, I've seen your other podcasts where a lot of people, it is all about arm wrestling. I mean, the best thing you can do to learn arm wrestling is just arm wrestle. It puts you in so many compromised positions that there's no exercise out there that you could ever use to mimic those same positions or strengths or applied pressures that you feel in arm wrestling that you do when you just pull somebody in training.
Yeah, no, I think you said that best, and that's what I try and explain to people. Like, you can work out in the gym, you can work out with pulleys, and you can emulate getting stronger in certain areas. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a place for it. But there are some things with arm wrestling that just cannot be emulated. And that's why I always tell people go and arm wrestle people worse than you, stronger than you, the same as you, every level, because, and I'm very fortunate. So, like, when I arm wrestle someone like Matt Mask, who is much stronger than me, he's able to put me pretty much anywhere comfortably and let me work as much as I want. And I've learned so much from that. But then not only that, myself, when I arm wrestle people who are newer and I can hold them, it helps me develop maybe somewhere I'm a little weaker. I can really attack that position. And just the way you're always moving on the table, your shoulders are moving, everything, you can't put yourself in that specific position at the time. And I
Mhm.
think that's something that table time does greatly. And like you said, and especially when you're starting from the ground up, building a foundation, a lot of it is just that repetition of table time and really
Yeah.
developing it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and so let's talk about some of your world championships you've been to. In one of your shows that I watched, you talk about just the how great it is to be able to travel and the community that you develop. Um, where are some of your favorite places that you have gone, and what made them so great?
mhm. Well, obviously, my very first world championship would have probably been my real taste of what traveling to other destination, meeting people from other countries was like, and that was in 1983 in Costa Rica,
Okay.
and that's where I won my first world title, and it was an incredible feeling, right? Like here I'm this young guy. I had tried so many different other sports, and finally decided to jump into the sport of arm wrestling. I worked out hard. I was still using both my arms, obviously. And I went down there, and at that time we went down with John Miastic, who was head of our Team Canada. And there's a bunch of us that went down, and it was just such a phenomenal time. But here, then I'm finally meeting other competitors who don't speak our language, but we had the language of arms, right? So it
Yeah.
was easy to talk and kind of know what each other's talking about just through arms, showing each other different techniques or, just learning different adjustments on the table, how we're using different leverages and angles and positions and sharing techniques. It was phenomenal, right? And then some of my most memorable ones probably would have been over in Russia, right, for the
Yeah.
Golden Boy.
Wow.
Something very, very unique and something that I wish they would have continued as a tournament because it was just something amazing where you walked into the ring. They had even at that time it was technotronic music that just pumped everybody up. They would drop arm wrestling tables from the ceiling to drop them down. Then they'd lift them
Wow.
between the passes, bring out entertainers, top entertainers over there, and then they drop the tables down again. Um, they made it quite a production for, if you'd win with coming up there and giving you different types of prizes besides your, like your golden bear and stuff like that and medal. And then, they'd always have everybody, you would be walked up to the table by girls and stuff, right? That was just, and then the guys, the opposite was got, like with the girls, guys would bring them up. It was
Yeah.
very, very showy that, if it ever was a production on TV, people could really jump into that because it would be a real sweet production, right? That it was just, it was amazing. And the people were phenomenal. They remembered you. Obviously, I went back. Keith always bugs me. Keith Koenig always bugs me because I had a fan group. People remembered me watching me, and even at that time, the first time I won, this entertainer, their top entertainer, she grabbed me and she saw a little girl give me a rose, and then she come over to me and she walked me around the ring, and just held my arm up, and everybody was standing up and giving an ovation, right? Like it still gives
Wow.
me goosebumps. But you're walking back and here you got military soldiers that are giving you their hats or giving you medals and stuff like that. Their appreciation. And it was like them, like, here you are, you're like a warrior, but you're fighting with odds.
Mm-hmm.
And people really looked at you that, oh, it was very special for me because obviously I went in against the odds type thing,
Yeah.
but it was phenomenal. And that was a highlight for me to continue with arm wrestling because obviously I was coming back as a one-arm competitor.
Mm-hmm.
And Keith told me that, I'd have to go against this guy, Von Cartwright, from out of the States, who was a multi-time world wrist wrestling champion. He weighed about 260 pounds at that time, and I was going in there at 154.
Wow.
Yes, this was the, disabled event. And in the disabled event, it was just open. It didn't matter what size guys we had, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was the smallest guy in the event, and I had to go against Vaughn. And of course, everybody was cheering for him because he was their previous champion. Well, then I beat him. Well, they just went nuts, like, right? They were just screaming, and so I was very highly respected after that. And then the following year, they remembered me, and here's people running over for your autograph, and you're just like, is this surreal? Like, is this really happening? Like,
Yeah.
but phenomenal, incredible experiences, right? And then, again, being part of Petaluma, right? I don't know if you've ever been down to Petaluma for the
I
World Wrestling
haven't personally,
Championship,
no.
but that was always an ultimate place to go to. Like when I was young, your age, that's all I knew about was you had to go to the World Wrestling Championships. That was the peak. That was the pinnacle of achieving success, was going to the World Wrestling Championships and winning there. And so I was very fortunate. I went to a few of them, and then I even went to the very last one that was in 2002. It was the very last one that they had in Petaluma before they took it to Las Vegas and Reno.
Okay.
And Denise and Leonard kind of looked after it, started a few more. They went on to about 2006, I believe, for the World Wrestling Championships. And again, just another amazing side of the sport that other people like Marcel Bosa, and Mike, oh gosh, Michael Todd and stuff like
Oh,
that.
yes.
All
Yes.
these guys that were small, 176-pound guys pulling at that time, right? Like I just seen so many of them kind of develop and go up and get bigger and bigger. And yeah, pretty phenomenal. Like a lot of phenomenal, great memories.
Yeah, I mean so what year were you in Russia when you were talking about the story you were telling me there?
So
What year
yeah,
was
that
that?
was back in 1992, and then I
Okay.
went back there in 96 as well.
Wow. So that's all. So in how old would you have been in 92? You'd have been 30?
92, I would have been 30.
Yeah, because you won your first championship in 83 and you were
83.
21 at the time, so 9 years following. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. I mean, just even the way you explained that gave me goosebumps. That sounds like such a phenomenal experience. You're on the other side of the world, and just being able to do something like that. I think that's why every single person who arm wrestles to do those kind of stories. And I think it's just so awesome that you lived it. You really lived it. It's just great to hear.
Mhm.
And while we're on the topic of, awesome traveling, favorite trips and everything, what are some memorable matches that come to mind? I know you've had so many, but when you think of some, whether it's the most meaningful, the most fun you had, what are some of the matches that really just always stick with you and kind of you look back on, you smile, you laugh?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, there's been so many different ones. I mean, yeah, I think you know that I used to travel a lot with Dave Hicks and Anthony D'Antonio. We were always like a trio. It was us going out and conquering and seeing what we could do, right? So Dave was actually always kind of my nemesis in a way too, because when we first met, we met down at the sit downs, and it was at the Can-Ams in Nanaimo. First time I ever met Dave. He had a big bushy beard and didn't know who I was, and then we were sitting down going against each other. And I remember him kind of looking at me because at that time, of course, I couldn't use my arm, and he's kind of looking at me like, the same type of thing, like, okay, who is this guy? And my hair was longer than yours, believe it or not, back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Sporting a mustache, yeah.
Nice.
And sure enough, I beat him. And then he went back, and then guys from Alberta went and told him who I was, and well, then he trained. Well, next time, then he beat me. And so over the years, it was always back and forth with Dave, and until our final Canadians, and then I finally beat him again. But then Dave would always have guys that he went against, and um, one of them was Kenny Hughes that he lost badly to, right? So I went down. That was 2002 at the World Wrist Wrestling Championships, and sure enough, Kenny Hughes was there along with a whole bunch of other guys, Devin and Simon, and oh geez, it was a multitude of guys. And so right away, I knew I was in the thick of things. Like, okay, I got to do some redemption here for Dave. And sure enough, I went against Kenny Hughes, and I flashed him. He didn't. Same thing. He looked at me and he's like, not great, grabbing onto the peg, and he just looked at me, and I flashed him. So then I went up against him again. I nailed him over, but he caught me deep hook, and he rolled me around, got me back. And then I thought about the match. It's like, okay, well, there's no way I can let him come back out again. I gotta drive in and hit him hard again, right? And so we went the third match for the finals and ended up doing that and beating him out. And then, of course, he ended up losing in the next weight class, but that was Randy Weavers, I believe, won the next class up.
Okay.
And he come over and thanked me. He says, "Thank you for. I've never been able to beat this guy. You went and wore him out, so I could finally beat him, right?" So that was a super memorable match to be able to beat him out. Like I said, the matches I had with Dave, we were so arms were so much alike, and our grip and our hands, and we knew each other's moves so well that it was just a fraction of having something on the other person that would, you know, basically would be the outcome of the match, is if we were able to edge that little bit on each other. And Davis had got his own history of what he's accomplished, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he has always been the tough guy. But there's always been other guys like Gabe Accardi and obviously Devin Bear and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of great memories. A lot of great memories. Perry Broom, like you said, I
Yeah.
knew he was always the top guy in Canada, and when we got together, we, like I'd already beat him out the one match. We had to come back and go again, and he was always the guy who was always staring at the camera and ramping it up, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I should try this, but I mean, I did it, and I was like, what am I doing? That's not me, that's
Yeah.
not me. But then he amped it up some more, so we went back and forth, and the crowd just loved it. They just,
Mm-hmm.
fed off it, and it made for such a sensational match for us, right? Like it just fed. So, yeah, another phenomenal match, but so many of them through all the years.
Yeah. I mean, those are amazing stories, all of them. I mean, I think you really represent something that's great with arm wrestling just because you're someone who's very well traveled. You've went and you always challenge yourself to arm wrestle the best guys. And I think that's awesome. And one thing I kind of wanted to touch on while we're in the same realm is you're someone who's really seen the sport progress throughout the years. Like we just talked about the wrist wrestling to arm wrestling, all of the changes. When you take a look back and you think, or do you, with the progression of the sport and just the amount of eyes that it's seeing, the people coming in, like what are your thoughts on it? What are things that you find interesting maybe that you could have never seen done, but they are done now?
I think, well, obviously, social media and the way technology has moved, right? Like
Yeah.
when I would start, we'd wait for an email to come to us, like a mail, like literally waiting for an envelope to show up in your mailbox that you're invited to a tournament, and half of them are already done.
Yeah.
And we kind of started with that. And then finally, there was the progression of the Northeast board, right? That was started up that we could finally start chatting and figure out where tournaments are going, possibly who's going to be there, to all of a sudden like Gary Roberts initiating the first thing with doing his arm TV, right?
Hmm.
And that was the first thing where everybody was looking forward to videos and him capturing a lot on video. And then finally everybody had their phones and it just blew right up, right?
Yeah.
And, for us to go and study people and find out who our nemesis were or challenge the guys in their backyard, we had to go to those places. We had nothing to study our competitor, right? We can just bring him up on our phone and say, watch a few of his matches, see the guys that he's gone against. Okay, I roughly know how he's going to pull because I pulled that guy. You know, Now it's so different, and there's such a broad spectrum of viewing audience as well that feed off social media, right? They're looking for something that's going to trigger them for a response of who they're going to follow. And I mean, now I think it's hard for someone like now, if I would have been, this would have been my error, move it up 30 years ago or something like that, that probably I would have been a normally like who would see a one arm guy arm wrestling and doing well, right? It
Hmm.
could have been an internet sensation, who knows?
Yeah.
But now you have guys, like I seen Devin. I can remember Devin when he first started. He had one of his first tournaments were right here in town. Me and Dave Hicks refereed it. Actually, I posted it. He looks just like his son Audien when he was
Yeah.
young, and I put that video up because I had it on video. But I mean, I can remember pulling Devin. He'd sit there and tug on my arm and try and pull it over, right? To him finally beating, progressing, being in Chehalis with him when, he had that his first real match that everybody noticed him with John Brzenk, where John Brzenk, he could pop him outside, but he wanted to go inside and see if he could actually beat. And they had an crazy match, right? But to be there
Yeah.
and see that was phenomenal. And then Devin, of course, took off, and then he got introduced to Travis Badgett, who was kind of like the big voice of arm wrestling. Like he was just intimidating people with his voice and calling them out. And you actually seen Devin change. Devin changed, and he started taking on that personality,
Yeah.
which now people know him as the way he is now. But he certainly wasn't that way back. He would have been this more timid guy, but aggressively learning the sport and wanting to do well. And now that's where he's at. And, he's made the changes through the social network to be where he should be and get the response that he needs with both in arm wrestling and getting the viewers or what the viewers are looking for. So, yeah, just that's the biggest thing, I guess. There's so many great competitors out there and so many different great people that have been in the sport of arm wrestling that you probably never find hardly anything about them. But
Yeah.
they've been a part of the sport and part of its growth. But you have to have people like the Devon and that too will just pump it up, do things that people might not like, but it draws attention, right? And I think that's where it's going.
Yeah, no, I really like all of what you said there. I think it's great, but it's interesting because I'm still young, and even for me, like to think of waiting on a newsletter to hear about a tournament, something like that. Like that's all foreign to me just because of how I grew up. Like sometimes I try and grasp the idea, but I feel like I don't fully grasp the idea. And like you were saying, like I have a match coming up in a couple weeks. I can pull up film on my opponent. I can message people, hey, how does this guy arm wrestle? How do you think I'm going to do? What should I do? You had none of that. You showed up to a tournament, and whoever was there, you might have never even seen them before. You might have heard of the name, and it's, it is completely different.
Yeah.
And I also like what you said about Devin, because I think I think the whole like Devin's whole family does it well. But I think what people don't realize is, if you talk to Devin aside from cameras, he's way different than on a camera. And I do think Travis has a lot to attribute to that, because Travis was one of those guys who kind of paved the way to show, like, as much as we need to be good arm wrestlers, we need to be entertaining. We need people to want to watch us. And I think Devin does the same thing where, he wasn't always this guy, but Devin understands what needs to be done to get eyes on him. And evidently, eyes on him will bring eyes to the sport, which helps arm wrestling.
Yeah.
And so I really like what you said with that. And I think that's such a cool just story, the fact that, you've pulled Devin so long ago. Like, you remember just being able to hold him, let him work, and just seeing how he's progressed. I'm sure it's really a sight to the eyes to kind of just see not only that, but the whole sport. Like you were talking about Michael Todd, Marcio Barboza. Some of these guys, for a lot of people who are newer into arm wrestling, like those are household names. But, you remember way back when they were just started arm wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It's been it's very memorable. And I guess that's what the guys would like, where, that would come over and train, would just hear the stories, because that feeds them and fuels them, right? It's great for anybody young like you to know different stories of our obstacles that people would face, so to inspire yourself that wow, if he did it. And that's what the guys would do, like they would see me and they go like, oh, here's Vern with one arm, but look what he was able to do, just because he's, put it in his in front of him and said, this is what I want to do, and to get there, these are the different steps I got to take to get there. And whether I didn't even, that was my plan. I didn't think it would work. I thought I was going to take a whole lot of losses, but it was really a roller coaster ride of phenomenal experiences, and but an inspirational one, because I've seen so many people be inspired by what I did with, fighting obstacles and hurdles that people would think would naturally be a disadvantage at the table, but I made it so that it wasn't, that even able-bodied guys felt me a threat,
Mm-hmm.
not even considering that really I'm stepping out of the, like the physically challenged class to step into your class and trying to give you whatever I can to be, like a, I don't know what you call it, like a good opponent for you to pull, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I challenged myself. I mean, it was just, I could have stayed in the class, and I'd always jump into those classes just to support the classes. But it was weird. I get a lot of kickback on that, because then people would go, why in the disabled class you're so good? But it was like, but I'm disabled, you guys.
Yeah.
I'm
Don't
disabled,
forget, just because I'm
right?
so good, like, don't forget. I see what you're
But
saying. Yeah.
and then if a guy beats me, then it's like, you're jumping all over that, but you pulled somebody from a disabled class.
Yeah.
Like it was such a hard thing back and forth with people, like where I should be in classes that, you shouldn't be in this class because you're not able-bodied and you may not be good enough. And then I'd have to prove myself, but you're too good to be in disabled classes, which I used to tell them, if you ever pulled some of those guys in disabled class, which would be me, you would be surprised, or you might even lose, because those guys actually have to train harder, work harder, become stronger to offset their disadvantage, right? And
Yeah.
And people couldn't understand that. And I guess the best way for them to understand that was to pull me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I mean, I'm very fortunate. I got to watch you arm wrestle in Battle Zone. That was where I got to meet you for the
Right.
first time, and
Right.
that was just a sight to see. It was amazing. We got to grip up after. I got to feel, and I can vouch, like, you feel amazingly strong, and I can. I when I just think about that, I think of all those world titles, Canadian titles, and all those achievements, and it is amazing, and it's so great to just even have you on here and hear these stories. I agree with what you were saying. It's very nice. It's motivational to hear these stories, and that's one reason I just enjoy chatting with you, Vern. It's great to chat with you, but also it's nice to be able to share these stories with people. Someone's gonna watch this, they're gonna get inspired, they're gonna, and that's just the amazing thing with this whole social media is we have a great funnel to filter it for people, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And, and,
But
and it's
sorry.
great in that way too, because there is other people out there that people don't, like when I was back there, like Chad Silvers, Mike McGraw, even years later when Bob Brown had his accident, right?
Mhm.
Being able to talk to people like that and seeing what type of hurdles they overcome, what were their challenges. Very different than mine because theirs were on the lower limb rather than a limb that would actually help brace them to the table, right? And
Yeah.
work the chest. So it's very different, but we all had our hurdles in it. And I used to always find it funny in the way that those guys, because I couldn't quite see the ruling in that. Why would you have to, if they took off a leg, why would they have to weigh in? Why would they have to compete that way? Why were they not allowed to put that leg back on? Like because
Yeah.
they thought it was a disadvantage. Like, so put a 15-pound weight on your back and see what advantage does it give you at the table?
Yeah.
Just to have that person feel normal at the table because, they lost something and they want to be, and that was me, was I just wanted to feel as normal as possible. So that's why the sport of arm wrestling made me feel that way, was I could go against able-bodied competitors, compete in their world and do well despite my disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
And people probably wouldn't do that. I was always a person who would wear long sleeves. Nobody really seen my arm.
Hmm.
So only one time when Betsy and Savan, who were doing Pulling John, they
Yeah.
were the crew who were doing the filming of Pulling John, and we were in Lake Tahoe, and they had a motorhome that they had Pulling John on the back of their thing. And Betsy was looking out of the back window, and Savan was in the front, and they said, "Why have we never saw your arm? Like you always have a sleeve way down or your other sleeve is down." And I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess I just never felt good with how each side looks because one side obviously is very badly deformed, right?
Hmm.
But so, and there's a picture out there with me where I finally take my shirt off and I'm posed on that, and they're like, "Okay, now we see why you win," right? And it's the one picture of me where that's about the only one that you'll ever see my arm, that the shirt is actually up a bit, that you could see my bicep and stuff.
Okay.
If you really look, you'll see I took my shirt off and it was resting on my other shoulder because I always felt, well, I didn't want to show anybody my disability. I just wanted to be able to just love the sport and people see me competing because of that I love the sport. And, if they saw the disability, then it was only to kind of like, what, despite a disability, I can still be a part of this event. I can still challenge the sport and try and do my best.
Yeah, and you most certainly did. You brought very many people a lot of great challenge, and it's so awesome. And yeah, I want to kind of take a kind of switch of lanes here, but I just want to. We talked about the Prince George Iron Arms earlier, and just how the name is stuck. And what does Prince George and the community, what does it mean to you over there? I know you've been there for a very long time, and I'm sure it just holds a very special place for you.
Yeah, of course. Well, like I said, I was with the original Iron Arms, right? When we come up with it, I designed the very first logo and everything else. And um, it was just a team that we would train, but we'd go always travel as a team. We'd always, I could tell you stories, endless stories, but that would take a long time of how we travel and how we, uh, be a very tight knit group. And that's what I've always tried to do is keep it a very tight knit group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Never be afraid of showing everybody every single move that I could. And a lot of people, funny enough, used to always mimic a lot of what I used to do at the table, as far as a low hand grip and some high pressure. And it was very, very effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you see that with every different club. Every different club has their strong move, like it'd be like Matt Mask, right? You guys always feeling extended and stuff like that because
Yes.
of sheer length of his arm and his sheer pressure, right? And it was funny. I remember feeling that pressure even on Matt because we were at I think it was a Hall of Fame in Edmonton, and he had a super match, and then he was at one table, I was at another table, and we just kept arm wrestling everybody, right? And finally, we kind of had an arm wrestle together. And of course, with his leverage, he could just pop me. But then we went straight inside and we just sat there dead center, and finally to a point like, that's good.
Yeah.
We're done, right? But that's what I love is I love going to other places and just finding out what makes this team so good and effective in what they do when they come to an event that they're so successful. This is what I need to learn, right? And you take those little bits and that, and then you incorporate them into your moves so that you have, not just a one move, but you have a repertoire of different moves that you can actually move and bring to a person so that when you study them, hey, this is what's going to work. And you practice them so much that it becomes a habit rather than thinking about it. It becomes just natural where you're going to move and transition, and it was good. And even the guy you're going to pull, Ryan Johnson, I
Yeah.
can tell you, I met him in Lake Tahoe, and it was the same thing. I think he won at that time, and I won mine, but I was practicing at the table with a few guys, and he actually come over. He said, "Can I just try your arm?" And if he remembers, he will tell you the story where he come over and tried to hit, and I stopped him, and he said, "Okay," and he walked away. That's just the way it was. Like,
Yeah.
um, sometimes you didn't even have to pull the person over. You could just kind of feel,
Oh yeah.
what their move is more effective than what I'm going to even try to do, right?
Yeah.
And I had a very unique experience in that sense where John Brezink, we were in Chehalis. Was it Chehalis? And anyways, yes, it was because I was talking to him about Bob Brown. Bob Brown just got in a motorcycle accident,
Okay.
and John was trying to adjust to what type of a friend how he could help Bob Brown. And so he spoke to me because of relating that I had a physical disability and how did that affect my changes with working with people, right?
Yeah.
So we had a long discussion about that. But then John and I gripped up because we never pulled each other. I was pulling, he was pulling, we pulled, and it was just a stay at the table. And he kind of looked, and I was like, I could have probably pulled him over because he was dead tired, but I didn't. His arm just felt good. His hand felt good. It felt exactly what I see him pull everybody with, and knew why he beats people, right? But I think he had a little small appreciation for me. And when we were in Sturgis, not Sturgis, we were in another tournament, Santa Clarita, I believe. And um, he had just pulled something like 20 guys in one, and then they were doing overalls, and Ron Baff had won. And he went to John and he asked John, he says, "John, out of all these people, who do I got to worry about in the overalls?" And John told him, "You got to watch out for Vern. Vern's the one you got to watch for." And so I didn't know that he said that, but then I go over and I'm pulling, and then I go down and I start talking to John. He says, "By the way, I went and told Ron he's got to watch for you." And I'm like, "Well, oh no, now you'll kill me, right?"
Yeah.
And he says, "No," he says, "I know you got a really good solid arm." So I told him, "You're the one he's got to watch in all those classes." So that was pretty neat. But it was good, nice to get that type of recognition from John that,
Yeah.
that he thought that it was not that bad.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, that's such an awesome story. Like, John is, he's very much considered the GOAT by a
He,
great amount of people, and just to be able to pull him, grip up with him, talk to him. I mean, you felt his hand, but his thumb is it's interesting to grip up with. Hey,
yeah.
I got to grip up with him. I didn't arm wrestle him, but just to shake his hand in Toronto. I met him, and I've met him a few other times, but that's where I got to grip up with him, and it's an interesting feeling, and it really kind of makes you just appreciate the levels in the sport, and even with yourself, like that pressure you give is it's quite amazing, and the way you can get your setup and manipulate it and be able to do everything. I find it very, very impressive. And yeah, I think it's great what you've done with the iron arms and just throughout the years, because I know like there's so many guys on that team who are still so solid. And I
Yeah.
watched in one of your interviews, you talked about how it's such a fierce team, and people were like, oh, and I still feel it's very much that way. When Prince George shows up, it's a threat
Yeah.
nonetheless.
Yeah. It was good that way because I mean, back in the day, obviously when I was better, I would lead the team. I'd probably say ever since I've had cancer, I have not ever been able to achieve where I was before. It took a lot out of my body physically, probably even mentally too, but I could never, always felt like I had a body, but my head was put on a different body and I could never get it functioning the same way. So I've tried, and I'd have guys like my friend Dave Hicks say, why will you go back in and pull again? And I said, it's just because I love it, Dave. He says, but you've achieved, there's nothing that you have not achieved. Why go in there and let people beat you when you're not as good as you used to be? And I said, it's not about that. I said, exactly what you said. I have done it all. Now it's just for the pure love of the sport that I want to compete and still say that I can put my arm on the table despite everything that's happened, and I can still be a part of it. For me, it's different than you, where you want to rise to the top. I've been to the top,
Hmm.
so I know what it's like. I don't have to chase it again, and so that's what I told him. I said that's why I still go into it. I said people can beat me, and then they can say, "Oh, hey, I beat Vern." That's great. That's great, but it's not the same Vern.
Yeah.
And I guess I had Edward Borg say it best, like Sylvia Borg's brother.
Yeah.
He went and said, because we had a really good match, and he went and said, I know when I pulled you, it was not the real Vern that I was pulling. As weird as that sounds, but a lot changed through my cancer and the scars that I have and the tissue. Like, I can't pull the same. Everything changed. The drug that they put me on, it caused muscle atrophy.
Hmm.
Those muscles I've never been able to kind of rebuild back. I'm in it, and it's really just the techniques that I know and that are able to kind of make people think or feel that strength still. But when I look at my training regimen, what I used to do, when I was going for world championships, I have it where my goal was to do 51 arm chin ups, and
Wow.
I'd hit that, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's no way I can even come close to that.
Yeah.
So I know my whole strength level is different compared to what I do for chin ups, one arm, push ups. And, but it's the love for the sport, which is what I get people to understand, is that you do it for the love of the sport. It's not about the winning and the losing. It's about being able to participate.
Yeah. Wow. That's phenomenal. You touched on one thing there I want to touch a little more, but obviously with all your accolades and achievements, what did a training regimen look like for you? What were goals you would set for yourself? And to kind of add on to this, if someone was starting off, or even someone is wanting to get to this level, like I'm sure it will see in the training, but the kind of work ethic it takes is just insurmountable. Hey, like you have to be fully committed.
That's true fact. Like, you have to set a goal for yourself. You have to pick out who you want to go against, study their styles, challenge yourself in those styles by, obviously training within a team who trains together, but then go to other places and train with other teams so that you do get a very universal skill of techniques, work with different angles, work with different leverages. Um, and then I used to just develop some core strengths, right? Like with my waist and back and that, because of pulling all on one side, it was very, very hard on the spine because I
Yeah.
couldn't compensate. You think about going and training, well, you can relieve your arm for a while because you can pull with the other one,
Yeah.
right? Your one arm. Me, I had to train the whole thing with my right arm.
Yeah.
So, I can remember, this is a funny story because I remember going to one tournament in Vegas where I pulled so hard and did a ton of after pulling. I'm wearing my championship jacket. I got my first place trophy I'm carrying. I'm trying to put it up into into the plane's rack up above me, and I couldn't do it. And here's this little old lady who was sitting right behind me who sits up, stands up, and puts it up for me. Let me get that for you. Wow. I sit down and I'm just looking at my jacket like, oh my gosh. And I thanked her, I said, I'm usually stronger than this. And she says, oh, I believed you. I said, but I had quite a workout. But it was just like, um, it, I would like max out so hard so many times with just my one arm
Hmm.
and to the point of fatigue, and then do it over again. Like I would do like my guys before they'd stand in a circle for 2 hours circling the table, and I would just pull and pull. That would be me getting ready for a world championships. Hit, pull, and they would all hit, and I would try and do something and pull them, and just keep going and going and going. So outside of the arm wrestling, I'd pick up some weights. It's very similar to John Brzenk though. Like John Brzenk was not a big weight training guy.
Hmm.
He would do, some kind of like static type of stuff and but mostly training. But that was the one thing that, obviously because I couldn't use two arms, using a barbell and stuff like that was very hard. I didn't want my one side getting so big that it made my other side look even more deformed.
Hmm.
So that was one thing that really hindered me in a sense from going to that next plateau. I
Yeah.
could have actually developed my one side to be even more bigger and more stronger, but I restricted myself because I didn't want to look in the mirror and see this huge abnormally, like that
Yeah.
just looked too different from two different sides. That I'd wear a shirt and you could tell how much bigger everything was, right?
Yeah.
So I held myself back and I would do more reps instead of more weight.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So I developed myself for endurance and and then at the same time having that endurance to be able to have the strength to still have a lot of static energy in a sense.
That probably helped the tendons a lot, though. The repetition.
And
Yeah.
yes. And that's why chin ups were phenomenal for me because I couldn't take my wrist and brace my wrist like my arm. So it
Yeah.
was a lot of just hanging, and then doing the chin ups. Obviously, I used to do a lot of one arm push ups, and that was just for people hitting. So
Hmm.
I'd be able to bridge myself,
Yeah.
and then with my side, wrapping my leg around the post was so that I could take so much pressure that I could respond back.
Yeah.
But obviously, it got to a point where in some moves, it crushed me in too much that I couldn't fight from that. And
Yeah.
my leverage of trying to pin somebody on this side also spread me out too much that I could not have a lot of down pressure.
Okay.
But I used to be able to try and spread a person's arm out far enough that it give me that leverage that it didn't take as much pressure to pin a person. That makes sense?
Yeah. No, that makes
Yeah.
complete sense. I think you broke that down.
Yes.
Awesome.
So that was a lot, and I used to laugh a lot because I'd get guys, especially down. I was feared in California, down in for a long time. That every time I'd go up, they go like, "Oh, Vern's here," and it was very good for me. I went to an Alan Fisher seminar that he put on. He put on these camps, and I went and I made a point that you know what, this year before any other tournament, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to spend some time with Alan.
Okay.
And I spent some time with him, and then I actually seen that I was still in the game because I was able to get in there with him and pull him. And then even Alan stopped for a long time, and he finally come back out to places like the Santa Clarita one when they used to put those on. And I finished winning there, and he went into master's class. He wouldn't even go into open. But then he come over and pulled with me, and he said, "Can I just try and see where you're at?" Well, he tried a whole bunch of different things and could do nothing, right? And then he must say, "You know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to start training." And from there, Alan just took off again, right? Like he disappeared for a while, and then he come back and he just did amazing, crazy stuff, which was so phenomenal for me to see, right? That maybe it inspired him a little bit. That okay, here, this guy is just owning me. I can't do nothing. I need to do something.
Yeah.
And yeah, he had yeah. But that's what really helped me was going to the guys that were willing to train you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I used to do. I was like, you know what? These guys are inviting. I'm going to go down there, train with some of the best. And that's what I feel. If you want to become the best, you have to train with some of the best. And you have to go to their backyard because they're not going to come up here or they're not, and that's what I thought. Who's going to come to Prince George just to come and train with Vern Martel? What do I have to offer? So I would always travel to people's backyards or go to their big events because that's where I was going to meet them. And so I always said that to myself was, I'll always challenge the other guys. And, I lost, I could never get Ingen Terzi. But then Ingen Terzi, we shared a room a couple of times in Vegas and stuff. And Ingen finally told me, he says, you know what? He says, if you had another arm, I know I'd lose to you. He says, your strength is that close. He says, but I have that over you. And by rights, I should win because I'm using both arms.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made me feel really good because I was like, how do I get this next plateau to try and take on Ingen? How do I beat him, right? And even, like Roman was a beast, right? But we were in Vegas one time and we had like 32 guys in our class, just top guys. And Roman come up to me afterwards and he says, you were the only guy who actually stopped me dead. And I actually had to take it and reset myself and hit. And he says, I could not believe, I did not expect the strength that you would have with just one arm. So a lot of good things that I just thought, thank you to those guys for even saying stuff like that. Because they were always elite pullers in my eyes, like John Brzank, right? I just wanted to have Luke John's character to the table. John is such a nice, super guy, super gentleman.
Yeah, very charismatic.
Yeah. And I said, if I go to the table, I'm going to be like a John or a gentleman, no intimidation, just here to arm wrestle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with what you said, and I think you bring up a good point. And this is one thing I am trying to do as I progress in my arm wrestling career. But like I'm just Dakota Shipton right now, right? And so for me, I need to go and I need to learn from these people who are the best in the world. Again, in Alberta, very fortunate. I have one of the best guys very close to me. But there are many, many more greats who they're not going to come and see me. They're not going to, I need to go out there and I need to make it happen. And that's why I go to these East versus West. That's why I do these things. I look at it as sort of an investment. I get to meet the people. I get to kind of put my name out there. I get to interview them like this, interviewing you. I've done Neil Pickup. I'll tell you right now, I would have never had the opportunity to interview Neil if I didn't go and put in the effort to meet him and build up a friendship with him.
Yes.
And so just like that. And now, when I see him again, I get to grip up with him. I get to learn from him. And those are little things that's where you learn the little techniques. With social media, we're lucky. You can learn a lot of techniques. You can learn a lot of things. But where you become like a fountain of knowledge or you get the specialties is just by gripping up with these people, really feeling it, getting that personal connection and talking with them. And it's really nice to hear that, you went and did that and it paid off so well for you because it's just reassuring and it's another motivator to anyone who watches this who's new to the sport. you're more than capable, and you just got to put yourself in the situations where you can go and get it done. And I think that's a really great thing that you said there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And somebody like Neil, another incredible guy for our sport, right? Like,
Yes.
where can you find a better commentator than him, or knowledge outside of what, Ian Terzi knows?
Yeah.
But Neil is phenomenal. And again, I've met him so many years ago. I got pictures of me and him when we were so young, right? But I always appreciate what Neil said. We were at the Arnold Classic where I'd won there, and afterwards he was at the table with Andy Barker and what was his name? Andy Barker and Pascal Gerard. They were at the table, right? And so I come up and I was like, "Oh, is there any way I can just pull with you guys, right?" But then I was pulling them over and they couldn't pull me over. And then, to get the compliment from Neil saying, your arm is iron, like you're iron.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really good. It was really good. And I love what he brings to the sport. And if the sport ever blew up, he would still be the guy for the announcer, right? Like he's the buffer guy, right? That boxing
Yes.
has. And
Yes.
incredible guy and wealth of information as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so this is just a curiosity question from me. But so when you think about the Golden Bear and the tournament that it was, and you kind of look at some of the, I mean, we don't really have a tournament that would compare to that, I feel. But when you look at kind of the super matches and how things are going, is like, would you still put the Golden Bear kind of at the top of the spectacle, like it was just something else?
The Golden Bear, in the way it was for like a multi competitor. They really didn't have super matches. It brought a
Yeah.
lot of the top people. Like still remember like John and Andre, not the Giant, but he was like the Ukraine Giant, Russian Giant. I think they were. And to
Okay.
watch them compete and stuff like that in there was amazing, right? Like it brought out some of the best the world had to offer at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And super match bring a different perspective altogether because it's bringing two guys that you think are the best at the peak in those countries, right? And you're meshing them together.
Hmm.
So I think there's always going to be that in the sport, that having challenge matches is always going to be a special feature on its own.
Yeah.
And then you're going to see the guys that got to work their way up through, at a world championships where the endurance and challenging so many different arms and hands and techniques and styles rather than just 5 times pulling the same guy and
Yeah.
slowly figuring out their technique. You don't get that shot on every single guy when you're working your way through the division to try and get to the top. It's bringing a multitude of everything as far as techniques to put that up against each single guy to climb that ladder, right? So I think it's going to be a lot for two different things, but how do you bring it to mainstream for people to watch, right? Nobody's going to sit through a tournament and watch all those matches. So it's
Hmm.
got to be featured on a couple of guys, just like what they brought out with this slap fighting, right?
Yeah.
People going at it. Who would have thought it's a sport? But now it's in the media. People like it. They love the reaction. They love the expressions. The only thing that our sport's got to change is kind of cut down on some of the elbow fouls or a person winning on a foul. Because people don't understand that. When they got a
Yeah.
person over here, all of a sudden their elbow pops and they lose it on a foul. Meanwhile, that person's saying, look at that guy's so strong, that guy can't pull him back over.
Yeah.
Why is he losing? They
Yeah.
just don't figure that out about arm wrestling. Like,
Well, and it brings intensity from here all the way to here in like a dead stop.
yeah, yeah. So, and I mean, again, nobody wants to watch somebody in a king's move holding and holding and holding forever, right? So, in some ways, I seen in the one event that they're raising the pad. That should actually kill the king's move, right?
Hmm.
Because the king's move is caught there. It's going to hit the pad before you can even get into it. So it's going
Yeah.
to might stop that. But people again, well, now you don't have to pin the guy as far down,
Yeah.
right? So there's always going to be different opinions. An open pad, I like it that they're bringing the pad right back to the edge of the table, because most people do have to pull back. They train to work with their, their lat.
Yeah.
So it can become that. I wish I had that before when I was pulling. I would have
Yeah.
been phenomenal. It would have worked out very well. But so there's a few things that they'd have to do to like capture people watching and understanding why a person's losing. Like, do they let that little elbow foul go and let the match continue? Like people got to be able to see why is this guy winning, but they want to see that guy win with that guy's arm down there like that. They want to see that guy's win, not lose because an elbow popped. Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, 100% it makes sense. No, I completely get what you're saying. There's a happy medium. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say that was something that when Gary Roberts was filming, he'd be running around with this camera trying to capture everything. Well, now he's setting on somebody that's in these positions, waiting and waiting for them, are continuously like, slipping to get in straps, popping, fast starts. It takes forever for him to watch a match. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
missing all these great matches, right? So I
Yeah,
told
you
him,
never picked the right one.
if those guys stop in a match or they're taking too long, lift your camera up and go somewhere else. Watch how fast those guys will want your camera back on them and set up faster and hope,
Yeah,
right?
fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
And he started doing that, and you just notice all the matches started going faster. Like we never ever would try and slip.
Yeah.
It happened sometimes, but it was just that hand control. You always went and finished your match, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then there's a purpose for the belt where two moves are too similar, and that just naturally happens. But to naturally go to a strap, yeah, I can see why you might want to beat your opponent that way, or you might have you know, better strength in a strap. But like I said, I've seen it all change, from the styles, and I see the purpose of it. But to get somebody watching, you got to educate them now. Me, 50 years of understanding it and seeing it, I can see why it's done, but I still don't always appreciate it, and I don't like watching a match that goes that long. I just want to see two people go in there and arm wrestle, and the best man win, pinning, not by losing on a foul or losing because they slipped, or all like so many different things, right?
Yeah, no, fair enough. I completely agree with what you're saying. There's some aspects where it can become very slow, and it's just nice to see a nice go and winning on pins, because it can be a little overplayed sometimes, for sure. Sometimes you're trying to win so much in the setup that it becomes a detriment to an entertainment perspective.
Yeah. It'd be like watching slap fighting without the slap, right?
Yeah,
Right?
they're just
It'd be
lining
like,
up for 20
oh, I missed.
minutes.
Oh, I
Yeah,
missed. But,
yeah,
oh no, because that guy might have moved. Oh, it's a foul, but so you actually win without a slap. Like, who would watch that, right?
yeah. No,
Right?
that's a
You
good
want to see
example.
the actual contact. You actually want to see the follow through, and so that's how I kind of portray it. Like, who would watch that if a person could just win on fouls,
Yeah, true
right?
enough. Yeah,
Entertainment gone. So
yeah.
that's where we are, and we've had great things like Game of Arms, or if you've ever watched Arm Nation TV series or Pulling
Hmm.
John. And funny thing, even I was the only Canadian at that time actually contacted by Game of Arms when they were looking for people.
Wow.
So they went to Denise Waddles and they asked who are people that people could be inspired by because of whether they had challenges or whatever. And that's why you see Chad Silver's in there. You see Mike McGraw because they're their disadvantages.
Mhm.
And I said, well, Vern Martel, he he comes in and he wins these tournaments with his disadvantage, and contact him. But because of the sheer costs of traveling down there, trying to make when they were going to film,
Yeah,
it just ended up turning that no, I couldn't do it.
yeah,
But it was nice to be reached out to
yeah. Of
and
course.
have that done, right? So yeah,
Well, another question I have for you is, I think it's on your Facebook, but you have a picture with Arnold, right?
yes,
Did you get to actually meet and converse with him?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Him
tell us a
and
little bit about that. That's
so
awesome.
with Arnold, the first year we just had pictures. We had pictures together. And then the second time I went, Sylvester Sly, he
Yeah.
had a product called Instone. He was selling supplements at that time, and he was at his booth, and he was with Arnold. And I come through, and I was with Kane Hemsing and stuff. Anyways, we were talking to the one girl, and then it was Sylvester Stallone who recognized me, and he says, "Oh, hey, you're the guy who just won up there." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, he says, "I was in awe." He says, "Obviously, because I trained for that. I know what it was like. And watching you, they were up on the top watching." And then, even Arnold was there, and we were in the group, and Arnold's like raising my arm. And he says, "Oh, you guys realize what this guy just did with one arm?" And he just beat his competition, who were all able-bodied people. And so it was always that way. It was always, even when I won on the stage a couple of times, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Shoot. Should know his name, but every time he would bring me to the front of the stage and raise my arm and say, this guy just went against all the odds and come out on top. But then like I said, I saw Arnold after that. We were outside the hotel, and he'd always get his Hummer brought in on a low bed truck. Well, he would fly in, but he'd get his Hummer delivered there. So we were outside there, and sure enough, he was getting that all loaded up. So then he saw me again, but at that time he's with Marie Shriver,
Okay.
who he's married to, and saw him again. And then he went to talk to me, and he says, "You know what? I really should get a hold of you because we run physically challenged games in Los Angeles." And he says it'd be interesting to invite the sport of arm wrestling to it.
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
was like, "Oh, well, I'd be totally down for doing stuff like that, right?" But then after that was when they went through all their divorce and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it happened. So yeah, that was my run in with them. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's wow. You have so many awesome stories, Vern. I love sitting here and talking with you. Um, but I got one more question for you, and then we can kind of lead
of
out of
course.
here. But one thing I wanted to ask you is with such a career that you've had and all of these things that have happened. I talked about resilience at the start. You never quit. When you look back your arm wrestling career and you just kind of take it all in, what is something like what's something that you really want people to remember about it? What is the takeaway when you think of Vern Martel's arm wrestling career?
Um, Tough one. I would just think that they saw a guy that, despite disadvantages, continued on for the love of the sport, like pure love of the sport. Like so many people get into the sport, love it. They see the family that it is. And that's what enticed me, that even though I went through such a bad accident, that I want to be still involved in the sport and do everything that I could to get that much closer to being able to be a part of it. And um, I think that's the biggest thing, is that never give up despite your hurdles and challenges. We all have them in some way or another,
Hmm.
but never stop yourself from rising to the top. Everything is possible if you want it, achieve it, right? So um, you have to find the people who help you. You have to put in the training. You have to go. You have to travel. You have to make contacts. Um, Study videos. But that's the biggest thing for me, is just seeing a guy that went through some lots of different obstacles, but still challenged himself in a sport that he loved. And that's what a sport, if you truly love a sport, will do to you. No
Yeah.
matter your obstacles, you want to keep wanting to come back. And that was me.
Wow. Amazing, Vern. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I know me personally, I really look up to what you've done, not only in the sport of arm wrestling, but just as a motivator in life in general. I think you are someone that many people can look up to and just go like, you never give up. You always the way you present yourself, even like you were saying with the John Brzenk, how you want to put yourself forward, you're very charismatic, you're very kind, and you're always willing to show people how to become better. And I thank you so much for coming on. It was a great conversation, and I would love to have you on again in the future. I feel like I could sit here and talk to you for hours.
No,
So
for sure, for sure. I'll have to come out to your club one time.
yeah, we'll have to get you. You know what? I need to come out that way as well. There's a lot of guys like Jacob Lee, Dan Gallo. Those are guys who are very very skilled. Who I've pulled Jacob a lot in the youth classes. Dan is someone he's a guy for me personally where I want to arm wrestle him eventually just because he's someone that I want to beat. I'm not gonna lie. He's someone that I think is a very good win, and I want to get to that point one day. And so just coming out and training with you guys, getting to see you, spending a few days, I think would be amazing. So we'll have to make a plan for sure.
Well, I sure appreciate you reaching out to me, and like I said, it means the world when young people like you still, think of guys like us that have, you know, probably have been in the sport for too long, but we still love it and hanging on to it with all we can. But that you even give us that recognition it's amazing.
Well, you're a fountain of knowledge, and I loved hearing the stories today. I thought it was great, and I'm sure many other people are going to love hearing it. And of course, thank you. And anytime, you're more than welcome to come on. It was great. But yeah, to everyone who's watching, thank you so much for sticking through the whole thing. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you tell a friend, and feel free to go check out some of Vern's stuff. He's got a lot of great footage out there. You can just search him up, and you can find endless stuff on him. And his story, his arm wrestling career is nothing short of inspirational. And I will see all you guys in the next video.